Okay, gonna be doing a brisket here. I got a little small packer brisket, really small. There's only 3 of us, so and kind of out of brisket chili season right now. So this is gonna be just some regular brisket slices and then probably some brisket nachos. So this is a lot of meat for us 3. But so to me, you know, outside of what you can see as far as the marbling and the striations of fat in the meat, that's going to be really important when you pick out a brisket. Making sure that you have a good thick end, that the flat stays flat really all the way through. This one doesn't taper off a bunch. It's small already, but it's a small packer brisket. So you know, if this comes down and really gets to a point down here, you're just gonna have a lot of meat that's gonna be wasted at the end. The other thing that I do is I do the floppy test. I want my brisket to be as floppy as can be, because that's gonna help in the tenderness of everything. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to trim this up the way that I trim it. I'm gonna cook this brisket on my Traeger. I'm gonna season it a little different than normal. I would say that if you're gonna season your brisket, which we'll do tomorrow, just black pepper, garlic, and salt is fine. But I'm gonna show you how I trim it, and I'm gonna trim it so I can easily, when this is done, I'm gonna cook the whole thing together, but when it's done, I'm going to separate the point and the flat, and I'm gonna make burnt ends. I'm gonna do it kind of like a competition style for burnt ends, that you cook the whole packer brisket together, then separate it, then you make your burnt ends from there. So that's how we're gonna do this one, so you can see the whole process from start to finish. Okay, I'm gonna start on the non-fat side. The first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove this big, hard piece of fat. Sometimes I'll save this to make tallow, but I'm not gonna do that today. So I'm going to, I subscribe to the theory that, that I over trim, and it's okay. So my idea is, and I've learned this from some champion brisket cooks, and from the KCBS, and have won the American Royal. And the idea here is that the more of this silver skin, what I'm doing right now is getting rid of silver skin, but the more fat you get rid of, the more surface area you have for your rub to come in contact with, for smoke to come in contact with, and all that. So it's very contrary to some popular belief or some conventional wisdom that this fat renders into the meat and makes it moist. This outside fat does not render into the meat. We'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow when we go to place it on the smoker. But it can, and we'll talk about this when we get to the other side, it can protect the meat, depending on, you know, the heat, where your heat source is on your smoker. So I'm going to, when it looks like I'm over trimming, I'm actually just getting rid of anything that won't hold seasoning, or that's gonna overcook and burn in the smoker. So this isn't too bad. There's some good thickness there. So I'm actually gonna leave that on. But this has got just kind of some yuck brown edges on the side here. So I'm just gonna trim that up, kind of square that up a little bit. One thing that I also like to do, since you wanna slice, you see the grains are running this way. When your brisket is cooked, you wanna make sure that you cut your slices against the grain or across the grain. So one thing I like to do, sometimes it's hard to see that grain when you're done cooking. So I like to make a notch out, and so now I know that all my slices are gonna come across this way. It's incredibly important on the flat, not as important on the point. But I'm gonna continue to carve out some of this hard fat here. Because again, this hard fat won't render out. It doesn't really offer you anything in terms of the cook. So no need to have it. You don't have to get rid of all of it. It just, there's just no reason for it to be there, and it gives you more surface area. So, all right, so I feel pretty good about this. I'm probably gonna take this, I'll clean that up once I flip it over. So now while we're on the fat side, this is an interesting cut because it's got a lot of weird discoloration that you don't normally see So I'm gonna trim that up. I'm not scared of it. It doesn't have a weird odor or anything. However, I'm just, for the sake of flavor, I'm gonna trim that up. Normally you wouldn't do much trimming right in there, but if you see anything you don't like, take it off. Or anything that's gonna be too thin or burn when you're cooking, take it off. All right. So then typically what I do on the fat side is I take it down to about 1/4 of an inch of fat. Some of this hard fat I'll take all the way down. Because again, not all of this is going to render out, and you don't want to have a big, thick layer of fat on the bottom of your every little bit of this brisket is going to get smoke, and it's going to get rub put on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this thing in the fridge till tomorrow, and tomorrow morning we'll fire up the smoker and we will get going. But you can see here, this is a pretty cool view. You can see here where these striations go this way, that's the flat, and then you can see that the point switches over this way. So pretty cool separation there. It's going to be really easy to separate this tomorrow when I go to make my burnt ends. So anyway, that's it for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay, we're going to season this brisket now. I'm doing this one different than I normally do because I've hit on a steak seasoning that I really like on steaks. For steak competition, I think it's gonna translate well over to the brisket. But the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put on salt and black pepper, that one layer of that. But then the steak seasoning that I have is really a blend of Eruption from Spiceology, the prime rib, which I'm almost out of, I just ordered some more from Spiceology, and then black and blue, which I just refilled from Spiceology. So that's what is in this little mixture here. So I'm gonna take this combo, the salt and the pepper, and we're gonna liberally coat this thing because briskets like a lot of seasoning, so we'll do that. I'm not gonna be real heavy with the salt because there is salt in Eruption. There's also salt in the prime rib. So. But I do want to make sure that I get enough black pepper on here. So if you do try this and you mix it, it's gonna smell like blue cheese, but it's gonna smell considerably different than what it's gonna come out. So even people who don't like blue cheese really like this rub. So I'm gonna do that, and then I spray it to set it. So I usually don't use a binder. I mean, there's a lot of talk about whether, especially now, mayonnaise, oil, whatever. I don't use anything on the bottom to hold it. I actually set it with cooking spray. I'm gonna use Pam olive oil cooking spray today. So once I coat it, I usually set it. I'm not opposed to putting a base coat of oil or mustard or whatever you want to use on the bottom. I just don't think it's necessary, and this is faster. So anyway, let's flip it, and then we'll kind of repeat that same process over on this side. You can see this is a really small brisket, 10 pounds, and I trimmed a lot off of this brisket. And then I had it uncovered in the fridge overnight. So you can see it had a good chance to dry out. I like the fact that it's uncovered. It's gonna help form that awesome crust. Nice coating of black pepper, and then again on with the rub. And then once I set this with the olive oil or the spray oil, whatever, you can be just regular spray pan if you want. Once I set it, I'm gonna let this sit for a little bit, come up to temp some, and then it'll kind of liquefy the rub and help it marry to the meat. So just a little pro tip there for me. We're gonna let this sit, marry up a little bit, let the grill come up to temp, and then we will be ready to put it on. Okay, our Traeger is pumping at 230, which is where I'm going to do this cook. Now, so a real quick explanation here, as I get in to do this. I like to, normally if I leave some fat on this thing, I cook it with the fat side down, because there's the heat source for the Traeger is coming out from right here, and it's the only part that would really damage the brisket. So so, you know, as the pellets feed and the fire flames up, you know, so there's the chance that you know, that's going to be the hottest spot on the brisket. So I would normally like to cook this fat side down, because that protects the rest of the meat. What I'm going to do here, since I trim this all the way off, is I'm going to put it on, and I'm probably going to give it 3 hours, and then I'm probably going to flip it over is my plan for right now. I'll take a look at it. Normally I put this on and I let it go for 5 or 6 hours before I even open the lid, because it creates that little environment in there, that smoky environment that you don't really want to mess with. I'm really going to give it 3 hours, since I don't have that protection on the bottom, and then flip it over. And I think we should be fine, and then I'll let it go another 3 hours that way. Then we'll start looking at, okay, is this the bark that we like? Is that what we want? And we are going to wrap this one. We're going to wrap this one in paper today. So we'll start looking then after about 6 hours what it looks like. Again, this is a small brisket, so it's not going to go as long. Meats have a tendency to cook faster on a Traeger than they would, like, say, on an egg or something like that. So let's put this thing on here and go for the first 3 hours, and then let's take a peek at it and see what it looks like. Here's the flip after 3 hours, so the bottom is just fine. No concern there at all. Probably could have left it going, but since I had it open, I went ahead and flipped it anyway. We'll work the other side, and here in about 3 or 4 hours we'll wrap it. All right, so we're about 6.5 hours in here, so I'm comfortable with where we're at. I'm going to wrap it using butcher paper and create that bowl that I want. And from that wrap, I'm going to put it in a pan to catch the juices that I can, and I'm going to put it back on and probably going to let it go. I just temped it. It's about 170-ish. I'm probably going to let it go another couple hours, hour and a half, before I temp it again. And then as it gets closer to 200, I'm going to temp as it gets close to, say, like 190, I'm going to start temping every 20-30 minutes to kind of see where we're at. With my goal probably on this one about 205, but I'm going to go by feel as I get to the end. Okay, so we are at temp here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate. So we're at temp. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the point and the flat here real quick. And I'm going to put the burnt ends back on. I'm going to put the flat into a cooler to let it rest. So really easy to see the division here of where the point and the flat separate. So you just want to work through that. Great. And you can see quite clearly where that separation takes place. All right, so here I have the flat. I'm gonna put it back in. I'm going to wrap it. And it is gonna go into a cooler or Cambro to rest. So the resting of the brisket, I think, is the most important part of the cook. So I want that to rest in there for an hour, quite honestly, before I do anything. So it's going to sit in there and really just finish the cooking process by carryover heat. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make some burnt ends. These are going to, I'm going to do kind of about 1-inch pieces, and then I'm going to season again, and they are going to go on the grill grates just like this, and they're going to finish cooking on the grill again. They can go to a higher temp because they are, they've got much more fat in them, and they're way more forgiving. So I'm actually going to put these in a pan, toss them with more seasoning, and then put them back onto the grill for just a little bit, probably another hour, quite honestly. And then once they're near done, I will toss them in barbecue sauce, and they'll be coated in barbecue sauce to finish. Okay. Let's season these things up again with just a little bit more rub. Whoops, there's one for the dogs. Ruby's gonna get it. Nope, Henry's gonna get it. All right, now I'm gonna put these back on the grill. I'll show you that here in just a second. Okay, so you can see they're on there now. They're gonna go like this for probably another 45 minutes to an hour. Just a note, the first part of the brisket, it's about 10.5 hours, a little over 10.5 hours into the cook. So that's how long this little brisket took at 230, 240 degrees. I bumped it up a little bit there at the end. So slow going here today, but these are gonna go in a little bit. It's gonna rest over in the Cambro for a little bit, and then we'll show you the slicing. Okay, so I lightly toss these in my favorite barbecue sauce, the Blues Hog Original, and I'm going to wrap them now in foil. Just put foil over the top of the pan, and then I'm going to let these go until they're just super tender, bite through. They've really been going on the smoker for probably about 45 minutes. I'm probably going to do another 30 minutes or so and just let this sauce set up and let them finish off. All right, so it's been resting, so we're going to slice it here. Again, this was just a small little dude. Slice it against the grain. Remember the notch that I made at the beginning? About pencil width. You get your slices out, and you should have the bend test without breaking, and so it looks like we're pretty good here. Probably could have gone a little bit further on this one. It's not quite all the way rendered out, but it's pretty close. So we're pretty good on this one. Okay, and here are our burned ends. Basically just like candy. So these are great. And that is really it for the brisket.